Hello and welcome. Today we're taking a look at one of your games. Let's go. This is the first video in my requested series where you, my dear viewer, can inspire my next video. So here we have our first one. Kevin would like to know about a certain moment at move 15, but also he would like a full game analysis. So we're going to take a look together at what happened throughout this entire game with some special attention at this move 15, where the engine wanted something and we're not sure why. Without further ado, we're going to dive right into it, and this is going to be the first time that I've seen this game, so you're going to get my raw, uncut reaction here. So after e4, c5, c3, we have the Alapin, okay. Kevin is playing with the white pieces around 1300. I saw that he hovers, and let's take a look at how people play Alapin here. So d4, c takes d, c takes d. Already worth mentioning that knight c6 is not really the best response against the Alapin because it doesn't really play against white's idea. The whole idea of the Alapin Sicilian is to have another pawn defending the center when this d4 is played, so that, as happened in the game, after d4 and takes, white has the so-called full center. And this is really, really good to have because it controls so much of the board and the opponent's territory, and also allows your pieces to come to nice natural squares of development. So this is the main idea, and unfortunately knight c6 doesn't really do much against this. So if you're wondering how to play against this as black, there's knight f6 as a variation, and there's d5 as a variation. This is a very typical thing in the opening. Once white plays c3, black plays d5. Actually, I saw a video about this by Chess Vibes recently in one of the principles, so I'm going to edit this into the description down below. Moving on, we have knight c6, d4, c takes d4, c takes d4, e6. Okay, pretty standard. So they're trying to maximize center control here with the move e6, but nothing special. So we're just going to continue developing. Knight f3, knight g e7, fine. Bishop c4, not the prettiest of moves, simply because you always have to think about what your opponent does. So with their setup like e6, knight e7, it's clear that they're wanting to maximize control over the d5 square. So when you go bishop c4, that defends this, but actually doesn't do much in terms of stopping it. So what's going to happen after bishop c4? They're going to play d5 anyway, at which point we just have to move our bishop again. And there's an opening principle which says don't move the same piece twice, which is the reason why the bishop c4 is a little bit inaccurate. Much better would have been to just continue developing. So knight c3, following the principle of knights before bishops, because the idea behind this principle, I should also explain, is that our knight is always coming to c3, 100%. There's no reason to put it on d2 or a3 instead. c3 is just the optimal square because it has the most amount of control over here, as opposed to the other squares. Whereas our bishop doesn't really know where it wants to go. Still, it shouldn't be apparently obvious. If he wants to go to b5 and then pin the knight in the future once this pawn moves, if he wants to go to d3 and then after e5 put big pressure on the king side later. So this bishop isn't supposed to know where to go right now. So we just play the knight first to increase flexibility of the bishop. So we basically say, hey, black, your turn. That gives us more time to figure out what the best square is for this bishop. So bishop c4 is a little bit inaccurate for the reason of d5 concretely, and for the reason of the principle knights before bishops. Moving on. Watching back this recording, I actually saw that I missed an opportunity to show something really instructive. So after knight g e7, we, instead of knight c3, just normal development, we have a chance to do something that we otherwise cannot, which is the move d5. And this is one thing to especially look out for when your opponent plays a seemingly weird or passive setup like this, when they don't contest the center immediately with a pawn. We should try to expand our center as much as possible. Center control is a very, very important concept in chess, which will grant your pieces much better squares, and their pieces are going to be forced to go back. So, for example, after the move d5, a strong central push, they could take if they want to, they don't have to, but the point is that this knight will have to move. We have this sufficiently controlled, so after, let's say, takes, they can't take with the knight because we have the queen. Any queen a5 fork doesn't really work because we have knight c3 defending it one more time, so no worries there. Ultimately, they will have to make a double move with the same piece, which, as we learned, there's a principle against this, because if you move the same piece twice, you're wasting time, especially if you undevelop it, as black has to here pretty much. But even if you go somewhere else and it's not getting trapped, you would much rather move two pieces once than one piece twice. The point of the opening is to rush development as soon as possible so that you can attack your opponent sooner. Any attack has to be after all the development has come out. So after knight b8 here, we can even play d6. Not sure if that works or not, but basically knight c3, d6. We have like bishop b5 check, which is developing at top speed. And we have the monster center here. The center is basically ours. So we can easily play knight d4 later, which in most openings you cannot. And we're going to get a pretty monstrous advantage here. So always be on the lookout for your center pawns expanding further with a gain of time, like this. Pawns love to expand, especially the center ones. We have bishop c4, d5, and white decided to take, and bishop b3. Okay, one thing worth mentioning is that a lot of players, whenever they're faced with a central pawn break like this, their immediate reaction is to always take. Like, no thinking whatsoever. So in this particular case, I'm seeing also the time usage. That's why I cut it out like this, so you could see the time usage as well. This is a 15 plus 10 game. So this was played in 3 seconds. So we went down to 15:07 and then gained 10 seconds, leading to 15:17. So this was played in 3 seconds. However, such a committal decision always deserves a little bit more attention because there's a serious sideline. For example, bishop d3 is another very legitimate option. And you have no chance of comparing these two moves correctly in 3 seconds. So a lot of players just take, oh, I'm going to take, and then I'm going to see what to do. But this takes pattern actually just removes these 2 pawns off the board. And once you know that, you can come to a much more objective decision of, is this good for white or is this good for black? So this is typical decision making in chess. And try to pause the video and figure out, is this trade good for white or black? In other words, who benefits from these pawns being not on the board? So pause the video. I'm going to spoil the solution in 3, 2, 1. I believe that black benefits from that pretty significantly, mainly because of this bishop. So the bishop on c8 is right now just blocked by its own pawns, but as a result of this trade, the bishop is now opened up for logical and nice development. So we're essentially solving one of their major problems in the position here. So that's why I believe bishop d3 is the better of the 2 moves, and if they take, we take back. Fine, nothing wrong with this. And we have a nice centralized bishop for the time being. Why not? So this would also be another inaccuracy, in my opinion. Simply trading these 2 pawns off the board, that's an easy way to see it, allows their bishop to come out as opposed to being a problem piece. Moving on, we have takes, and bishop b3, fine. Knight g6, opening up the bishop for development to be able to castle, just following development. Castling is fine. Then we have bishop e7, fine. Perhaps bishop d6 is a little bit more well placed for later, but right now black was a bit afraid of the rook e1 check. So after bishop d6, we would have rook e1, and then maybe they would have to go back and lose a move or place themselves under a pretty dangerous pin, at which point they would already lose a pawn, sorry, which we cannot take immediately because they have a little bit of a trick. Bishop h2, we take with anything, and they take back here. So that's something to also watch out for, discover checks. So they would love to play this under normal circumstances, but bishop e7 is right now necessary, I believe, simply because they have to castle as soon as possible to avoid any early checks. Knight c3, fine, nothing wrong with this, normal development. And then we have bishop e6, fine, bishop e3, good, castling, and now we have some sort of equal-ish middle game. And let's see how we handle this. We're approaching move 15, right now we're at move 11, so this should be fairly interesting. Let's see how the middle game is handled here. Queen d2, okay. Fine, connecting the rooks, can't be wrong. Bishop f6, hitting the isolated pawn over here, but we have enough coverage of it, so no worries. Now it's time to get all the pieces in the game, so I'm expecting rook c1, rook fe1, something like this. Rooks belong on open files, as we know. So rook fe1 played good. Knight h4, and I believe this is move 15. Let me just double check. This is move 13, apparently. Let me just double check if this is move 15 that we're talking about. 1 second. Okay. Okay, so it wasn't 15, it's actually 13. This is the moment in case. So we're talking about, do we take here or do we go 95 as in the game? So let's think about this. It's not completely apparent to me why this would be the absolute best move. Let's see. So in the game, 95 was played. which unfortunately leads to some complications here if black plays accurately. So I believe this is the correct choice because there's simply no better choice. After knight e5, I'm seeing that after bishop takes, pawn takes, excuse me, d4, it leads to some complications, but after that, I believe black comes out on top. For example, bishop g5, d takes c3, queen d8, rook d8, and then we either take here, because if we take here, they have another in-between move over here. This gets pretty complicated, but at the end, black should come out on top. This, and this. And at the end, we're down a pawn, if I counted that correctly. Yeah, there's no counterplay to 95, so that's why we are down a pawn. Anyway, let's take a look. So 95 leads to a lot of complications, and this would just be good in terms of you're putting another piece on the edge of the board. So you're putting one of your opponent's pieces on the edge of the board, so strategically this is good for you and gives you some more time to do other things. Whereas 95, you shouldn't calculate all of that, but you should just see it as complicated, essentially. In the game, knight takes e5 was played, which is not a worry whatsoever for white. In fact, black has to be careful because after it takes, maybe there's some bishop g5 stuff, which could be potentially dangerous, although they have bishop f6 right now, so they should be fine. But this pawn is weak, so I believe this should be good for white at the end of the trades, because they don't want to play g takes f6. That would be horrible for the king long term. So queen takes f6, but then this pawn falls, and after some trades, we have a position like this, where the bishop prevails long term over the knight, simply because bishops love to be in positions where it's very open, as is the case now. There's no center pawns, so it's a very open position, and there's play on both sides of the board. So this is very, very important when you take a look at imbalances. This is a little bit higher level, but since we're taking a look at everything, so let's say these queenside pawns are gone. At that point, the knight's ability to cover both colors prevails over the bishop's long range, because we don't need that range since all the play will be on one side, if that makes sense. So after queen to g6 here, this happened in the game. After queen g6, we have rook c1. Okay, h6, fine, giving some breathing room for the king. Why not? And this knight is still at the edge of the board, and there's no prospects of entering the game because this well-placed queen. Rook c7, fine, although there was a free pawn here. After rook b8, we would just stay on the diagonal. Let's say queen e4 offering a trade, so queen b7 seems like a free pawn to me. And after, for example, rook a8, we can't take here because we have to hold on to the checkmate, but just queen e4 offering a queen trade while sticking to this, and we're just winning. Okay, missed opportunity there. But rook c7 also a very principled move. Once you get to the open file with your rooks, the whole point of an open file in chess is to infiltrate into the 7th rank. So very principled move. Rook c7, d8, queen takes b7, no, good. Rook b8, queen c6 hiding behind the rook, wonderful. And the queen trade is accepted, which is not advisable for black. They should have at least tried to keep queens on. I think it would be better. Simply because right now they are losing. And when you're in a losing position, when you're generally behind, your job is to make it complicated, to avoid trading material, because that makes it complicated as well, and to target the enemy king. In other words, the fact that they are down a pawn is going to matter a lot less if the queens stay on the board. So, I don't know, just somewhere. Now, sure, that carries its own troubles, but objectively, in human play, the better of the two moves is to keep queens on the board because it increases the chances of a blunder. So for example, let's play queen g4, and then rook e to e7 already becomes a devastating blunder because the back rank is insufficiently protected. So it's protected only by the bishop, which is already under attack, so rook takes b3 just wins for black, for example. This is just a short example of how a human could easily mess up by playing the most logical move in the position, but because there's more pieces on the board, this becomes harder to convert than it otherwise would. So when you're the losing side, even if you're down only a single pawn, try these 3 tips. So again, I'm going to repeat them. Number 1, avoid trades at all costs, because pieces are where you generate counterplay. Imagine this was a pawn endgame, only pawns, then there's no counterplay anywhere. You're just dead lost as black. So pieces are what generates counterplay. So avoid trading at all costs, number 1. Number 2, make it complicated, meaning not just keep pieces on the board, but try to make a complicated situation where there's multiple pieces hanging, where there's a lot of undefended pieces, both the kings are wide open, like nobody knows what's going on. That's your perfect position because you're at a losing stage right now. So you want to completely uh, mess up the entire board, mess up everything, just so that you maximize the chance of your opponent making a mistake. That's the core of the problem. So after queen g4, for example, there's a solid chance that my opponent goes, oh, I'm going to double up on the 7th rank, and then I have this nice little counter tactic. So this was a slight mistake by the opponent, but also very instructive in terms of how to play when losing. So sometimes you learn from your own mistakes, sometimes you can learn from your opponent's mistakes. Queen takes c6, rook takes c6, okay. And as we approach the endgame, basically, this extra pawn is going to mean a lot more. Also, I forgot to mention the third one. Sorry. So number one was avoid trading. Number two, make it complicated, and number three, target the king. So don't just keep pieces don't just keep pieces on just to keep pieces on. Try to actually remain active with those remaining pieces. So for example, like queen h7, you may as well have traded queens because right now their queen is in the fight, but yours is just existing. So that's why I'm saying a move like queen g4, basically. Try to remain somewhere active, but avoid trading. So number three is target the king. That's where most of the counterplay lies because essentially if we're down a rook, a queen, whatever, and we give checkmate, that's still winning the game. So it doesn't matter how much material we're down if we are just checkmating. So those are the three. Now, coming back to the rest of the game here, we have an endgame approach. So they're infiltrating to our second rank. So they're going to take this, but we're going to take this. So it's fine. And we're still up a pawn. This is nice and defended. So all good, and we should aim to trade. So we should do the exact opposite of what I mentioned, how to play when losing. So how to play when winning is, number one, trade at all cost. Number two, keep it simple. Don't keep it complicated. So keep it blatantly simple. And number three, keep your king safe. So it's the exact opposite of how to play when losing. By the way, you can find all these tips in the description down below. So we have rook b7 threatening the discovery here with bishop takes f7. Knight f5 unfortunately misses it, and we do it. Well done. Nice little tactic, setup and execution. And now we have this endgame, where we're up an exchange and two pawns. And the easiest winning plan is probably just put a rook behind the pawn, push until they block it, and then just unblock it. That should be the most straightforward win. Let's see how white handles this. Rook a1, beautiful. a4, wonderful. Rook c1 pin, why not? Yeah. This either is going to force a trade or winning the knight. So this is probably the cleanest win because black played a little bit inaccurately. Best chance for black is to try and block this as soon as possible so they have more time. So for example, instead of, I believe that, yeah, they played rook c7, I'm not sure what this is, rook a7, and after a4, rook a5. To at least try and hold on to this as much as possible to have time to get the king in the game. As we know, in the endgame, the king is the main actor usually. So here we have trouble going rook b5 because of the knight, so we would have to go rook b4 to remove the knight, but that carries some, risk as well. We're not losing the exchange because we have a check, but why make it complicated when you're winning? So we have to watch out here for tactics as well. So that was the best chance for black, but black played a little bit inaccurately, so now we have an even faster win. We're just going to double up here and take the knight. Rook c8. Okay, so their last chance was to use the back rank weakness that we have to avoid this trade. Rook e7, and if we take the knight, we get checkmated. So while we're dealing with the back rank weakness, they would just move the knight away, and again, they would keep material on the board. We said this is where they generate counterplay. And so that was their last chance, but they stayed pinned. Rook c8 doesn't really help them. Rook c8 is a typical pattern regarding 97, like to unpin, but we're going to double up, so that doesn't really apply here. Wonderful. And now we're just taking everything. And yeah, they timed out, which is very disrespectful, actually, in online chess. Please resign this position. Don't force your opponent to wait 8.5 minutes. That's a bit of bad manners. But all in all, very good game from white here. And we saw the main moment, so we're going to revisit it one more time. So that was move 13, I believe. There we go, this knight h4. So sometimes you have to take a look at the, you can help yourself with the engine, as I'm going to do right now. There we go. So it says plus 0.25 if knight takes h4, but after this it says -1. So probably with that line that we saw, this shouldn't be that obvious to anybody below a certain level. So what you do here, when you're unsure of why the engine wants something, the general formula is to go into one variation and then another until it becomes obvious. So you may be thinking, oh, this is not good. So your initial evaluation, maybe this is not good because this bishop is really good or something. But in fact, this bishop is very much out of the game. So maybe your evaluation is off in that sense, or your evaluation is off because you thought your move was better. So you thought this was good, but this was better, perhaps. In that particular case, you have to go through these variations with the engine and just ask the engine, basically. So you play white, engine plays black, and you try to beat it in an argument. So you would just say, oh, okay, after knight takes e5, I think white is better. And then you take a look at the engine. I'm going to read it out. It says plus 0.8 after d takes e5. So the engine basically agrees with you. And this, and just like it happened in the game, actually, that's the line. So both of you played really well here. And this leads to a slight advantage for white, as we saw. So that's why knight takes e5, which was played in the game, is better for white. But the reason this knight e5 is a mistake is because of bishop takes e5, the line that we saw earlier. Now the engine says minus 0.8. We have to take this, otherwise we're down a piece. And now, yeah, d4, as we saw, it says either bishop g5 or bishop takes e6 both lead to -1 at the end. So we said in my calculation here, yeah, d takes c, queen d8, because after bishop d8 we have this and then tempo here. Let's take a look. So bishop d8 is unfortunately a blunder because of c takes d2, which comes with tempo on the rook. Whenever you're entering these tactical battles, I take you take me, and those wormholes, the most important thing is to avoid giving tempo to your opponent. So after this and this is not just taking the queen, but also threatening to take your rook with a check, because there's going to be promotion at that point. So that's why you got to watch out for this type of stuff. So queen d8 feels natural to a to a high-rated player, but this is the reason why. Because intuitively I recognize that this just gives more tempo. If my rook wasn't here, if it was somewhere else, maybe bishop takes would be better. So let's just adjust that position to verify. Let's say in the middle of this, we just play a6 rook d1, just to switch around. Now after this, yeah, bishop takes d8, even the engine agrees, is the best move here. Because this is not a tempo gain anymore, since our rook isn't hit here. So now we have time to go bishop takes h4. And this position is within equality. This pawn is way too weak to hold on. Pieces are going to start flying off the board. It's going to be a drawish rook endgame, I assume. So this is a very valuable tip and lesson when it comes to these I take you, you take me worm captures. I'm not sure if there's a name for that. If there is, let me know down in the comments, because that's a very weird way to call it. Queen takes d8, rook takes, yeah. And b takes c3 is good. Sorry, b takes c3 is good. Bishop takes h4 is good. This is fine. Everything leads to about -1 in all variations. Now, that's very unrealistic to calculate, especially in a rapid game. So that's why I said initially at the start, all you should know is that this leads to complications. You should see that this is a legitimate option, instead of just assuming that everything is taken by the knight, which usually it is, but there are exceptions, and this is one of them. So after bishop takes here and d4, you should see, oh, this is complicated, I don't want this. Unless you can 100% make sure that you come out on top of the complications, avoid complications. So that's why I wouldn't play knight e5, and there's no retreating moves, which is the reason why knight h4 is best. And for example, something like queen e2, defending this just unfortunately fails because we don't have enough defense here. So after like takes, this is going to be no more than a draw at the end. They're going to take here, we're going to take here. This is probably going to boil down to a draw. So that was the game, and that was the special moment here. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, or if you feel like I didn't cover anything, I didn't cover some aspect of the game, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. I'm going to see all the comments and, give my answers to the best of my ability. And I suppose that's it for now. If you enjoy this type of content, if you want to see your game analyzed perhaps, or request any other type of video, be my guest. Subscribe on my channel to see more stuff like this. Like on the video if you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you very soon. Take it easy.